8 minutes before top of the hour, 10, and we're going to be wrapping up the show with our hashtag Heard on Air feature. This is a part of the show where we revisit some of the interviews that you might have missed on some of our sister shows. And this time around, we'll be looking at Wednesday nights with Inaid Wadi. He had a really wonderful conversation last night. It was a glance on Africa, the immigration unrest here in South Africa, and how it has rekindled the Pan African debate. Is it still a relevant concept in 2026? And he had a wonderful panel of two, Mthetho Ngcukayithobi, South African civic leader, and the president of the civic organization, the Progressive Forces of South Africa, and also Nelvis, Qekema, president of the Azanian People's Organization, AZAPO. And it was insightful, it was heated. The two men didn't agree entirely on what Pan-Africanism is in 2026 and whether or not it's still a relevant concept. So that's how we're going to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'll be back with you again next week for the Tuesday edition of the show. Otherwise, bye for now. Shop, shop.
No, in fact, it cannot be said with a straight face that Pan-Africanism has failed. In fact, Pan-Africanism has succeeded, and succeeded tremendously, materially and otherwise. And that is not to say that Pan-Africanism has not met challenges, and that it does not continue to meet challenges. Indeed, it does continue to meet challenges. In fact, it should, because Pan-Africanism is waging a struggle for the self-determination of Africa. It is waging a struggle against imperialism to ensure that the continent is able to husband its resources, beneficiate its resources for itself first before it goes to the outside world. And that has not been happening in the manner that we wanted it to do, because the imperialist world, and I'm talking about, your America, your France, your Britain, your Germany, you name all those countries that shared the continent and its resources amongst themselves. And in fact, we are where we are today because those countries that I'm talking about way back in 1848, they made it a point that the continent was divided amongst themselves and its resources, and they then started to zone the country in a very arbitrary way, which did not take care the peoples of the continent, which is why you find that there are Botswana in South Africa and Botswana in Botswana, because they just cut without caring, and they were just caring about their resources, which are sharing among themselves. That's why you have Basotho in South Africa and Basotho in Lesotho. You also have people in South Africa being strewn all over the shore. And then we have our relatives here and others across the borders, with the borders were arbitrary. And this was happening because they wanted to make sure that economically we never got to be independent. The strife that you are talking about, people crossing from Zimbabwe, coming over here, from Rwanda, from Uganda, the wars you find in the DRC are created by the outside world more than they are created by us in the continent. So what I'm saying in short is that no, Pan-Africanism has succeeded because we are now having 54 independent states because of Pan-Africanism. And we are now having a continental governance, which we did not have before because of this Pan-Africanism. And then we are coming together as the countries of the continent of Africa and the diaspora because of Pan-Africanism. Even ideologically, we're becoming clearer and clearer because of this Pan-Africanism. Even psychologically, economically, we are clear where we stand. And because of this Pan-Africanism, it is the reason why Muammar Gaddafi, the leader or the former leader of Libya, was killed because he was coming about with one African currency, and that was going to undermine as to the belief of America, the dollar. That was for them another project to inject de-dollarization in the economics of the continent. And as a result of that, he was killed. So all I'm saying is that we are where we are right now. Even the strife you're getting in the continent, the strife you're getting in South Africa, it's not organic to the people of South Africa and the continent. It is something that is coming from externally. It is the forces that do not want us united. It's the forces that want to have us in poverty forever and forever. It is the forces that want to subject us to their domination, the world domination, imperialist domination. So I am saying it is those forces that want us to fight together and amongst ourselves as Africans. That's what you're finding right now. And then if you look across white people, Europeans, no problem. Is there anybody worrying about undocumented or documented white South African Europeans? Nobody cares about that. We're fighting amongst ourselves because we are still suffering under the rough arm of racism and self-hatred. That is why you find it very easy to kill one another, ban one another, ensure that no African will be getting health care in our country, no Africans will be sending their children in our schools. Yes, of course, if you are worried about undocumentation, that can be addressed through the rule of law. And otherwise, you cannot be marauding and going around and beating up people and then killing people. No, never, 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 never.
Thank you for that, Nelvis. And I think, Mthetho, Nelvis raises some very, very critical points. When we talk about nationalism or sacrificing our unity over nationalism, and once again, when one looks at this, is not only a problem that is unique to Africa, this is a problem that is right across the entire world. When we talk about 54 nation states on the African continent, we've seen it in the past. We've seen the breakup of the Middle East and the Persian Gulf region, where they became nation states. We've seen that breakup in the Asian subcontinent, with the partition of India, Pakistan, and leaving Kashmir to fight over. So perpetually, you are in a state of conflict. You are in a state of war. Now, looking at South Africa and looking at the African continent again, we've moved away from colonial resistance to national independence. But again, looking at the independent nation states, should they be prioritizing their own sovereignty over a united African continent?
Host, once again, thank you very much. My colleague in studio, at some point we need to be factual and we need to be honest of what is really transpiring on the ground. I per se, I am mostly on the ground when we are talking about beating people, etc. It comes back to resources. You would find countries like your Zimbabwe, all in the African states, people who have land, and you would come in Africans who tell you that our land is still in the hands of Europeans, of which we believe, yes, it's still in the hands of Europeans because we are still in a journey of fighting back the system of apartheid, obviously colonizations, etc. But we need not to mislead people. We are talking about people who are already established Take, for instance, right now, Zimbabwe has just given out land back to white people with compensation. That on its own, it says a lot. South Africa, at this current juncture, we are still at resources. It may be healthcare sector, it may be also the educational sector. Now, when I'm saying let us not be misleading people, we are saying that African people need to come into the country in the form of the correct documentation. When we are putting them into schools, we don't want them into our government schools. They need to go to private schools. That's where they belong. When you're taking them to hospitals or clinics, not in our government clinics, they need to go back to the private. We have a situation right now of a 1.1 billion owed by Africa from tuberculosis treatment to cancer treatment. Nobody's paying that bill as South Africans. And bear in mind that we need to understand that this is money from the taxpayers' money. The little South Africans that are employed are the ones that are feeding the bill. We are not a country that would house the whole of the 54 states that are in Africa. We don't have that capacity, as they have also their own resources, as their own their brothers, their elder brothers, into the liberations of their own countries. What we are looking for as South African is trade. When we are talking about trade, we are not talking about cheap labor. We don't want slave trade, because most of the time now you would find what you're bringing here into South Africa in these economic migrants that we are finding in this country. It's people that are going to be cheap labor. They are going to be flaunting our laws into our labor sector. We've got labor laws that says that, especially in the low level area, you cannot hire an illegal immigrant, a foreigner, in a non-rest scale. That is Employment Act 1904, and it constitutes when you move into that sector of Immigrations Act 13 of 2002. So we need to understand of where we are in South Africa. The born of democracy, it's still 33 years. We still need to establish a South Africa for South Africans first, for us, in order to say, yes, we can try and assist whomever that is looking for assistance. He's naming countries like your DRC. We are talking about tribal wars again, because if you look at the Rwandans that were fighting also in DRC, it's tribal wars. Now, you would come back to the very same borders that you would talk about. Borders were there, like it or not. They were there before even the imperialists came with them. It's just that they were not visible per se. I'll make a typical example. Borders were divided by rivers. A certain family, in order for it to go and take its livestock to graze, you would not pass up until you would ask for permission into that, and you would look at certain elements of people, especially like your Amamfengus in the Xhosas. You look at Amabhaca and etc. There were borders in those in those areas. It's not something new. Let us not mislead people that to say that there were no borders. There were not borders per se to say I am dividing a line. There were borders. You would find it's a mountain. You would find it's a river. That's where we are. So as South Africa, we are still new in this democracy. We are not ready to help Africa. We still need to find ourselves as South Africans. Now, we will just hit back again to the formation of this slave trade. You'd find the rest of Africa in our kitchens. If not in kitchens, you would find them in traffic lights begging in our traffic stop signs with kids.